Our learning goal for today is I understand the geographic, political, and economic impact of the Transcontinental Railroad. And remember, when we're talking about geographic, we're talking about things having to do with the land and the environment and how that affects people and how people affect the land and environment. When we're talking about politics, we're talking about laws and actions like that the government passes to encourage people to do or not do certain things. And then when we're talking about economics, we're talking about money and businesses. So the geographic impact of the Transcontinental Railroad, mainly two main things. When they were building the railroad in the West, their main geographic barrier was the Sierra Nevada mountains. And so they had to figure out a way to get through and build tunnels through the Sierra Nevada mountains. So if you remember from the Ed puzzle we watched over the railroad, they used nitroglycerin to blow up parts of the Sierra Nevada. The problem with that is it's extremely, extremely dangerous. And so it put the Chinese railroad workers at extreme danger of losing their life. The second geographic impact we looked at a little last week, and that's the destruction of the buffalo. When they were building the railroad, they destroyed the buffalo's habitat, so that impacted some of the buffalo and led them to die. And then the railroad workers also hunted the buffalo and used different materials from the buffalo to gain a profit. This hurt, obviously, the buffalo, almost causing it to be extinct, but it also severely impacted the Native American tribes. The political impact of the Transcontinental Railroad is the Chinese Exclusion Act. Chinese workers had moved to California at first because of the gold rush in the 1840s, and then also to work on the Transcontinental Railroad in the 1860s. They faced nativism, which is extreme hatred against immigrants or prejudice against immigrants. And they faced this nativism from white people in the West who believed that the Chinese workers were stealing their jobs. This feeling of nativism and hatred against the Chinese immigrants leads Congress to pass the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1882, which is a significant law in U.S. history because it's the first law to limit immigration, and especially from a specific group of people. And finally, the economic impact of the Transcontinental Railroad was positive for all parts of the country. It increases people's standard of living, which is another fancy word for the quality of your life, the things you can afford that make your life easier almost. So in the West, farmers were able to sell and ship their products, their agricultural products, over to the East so they could increase their market for people who would buy their crops. And then in the East, they could ship different manufactured products, clothing, all sorts of goods over to the West, which made people in the West who lived out in the frontier have a much better quality of life. So hopefully this gave you clarity on the political, geographic, and economic impact of the Transcontinental Railroad, and that you feel better prepared to answer your DOL questions for today.